Hello and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be looking at questions that are under the study island topic exponential and logarithmic representations in Algebra 2, and that also covers questions under the standard 2.5a, C, and 3.1b and C. And so what I've done is I've just gone through this lesson and I've pulled out some example questions that can be done straight through the calculator. And the calculator I'm using is the TI-84 Plus. And this is the calculator that you get to see on your EOI on the screen. So I highly recommend that you get a hold of your own, whether through the Learning Funds or you borrow an older friends or relatives, or you buy one yourself, and that way you can practice using it. It's just a great alternative to help you check questions or to help you out on those questions that you really struggle with yourself. So as I'm going through these problems, write down notes on the steps of the buttons that I'm pressing so that you can have those steps to refer back to when you are trying these problems on your own. This first question here gives us an equation to match to a graph. And it gives us 4 possibilities. They just don't all fit on one page for me. So anytime you're asked to match an equation to a graph, you're going to go into y equals above my finger here and clear out anything that you have there and then just type the equation as you see it. So we're going to have 4 times 1/2 x, and I always like to put my fractions in parentheses and I use the divide symbol so that the calculator knows that's a fraction. And then to make an exponent of x, I'm going to have to use the up arrow and press an x and then press my left arrow to get out. And so that up arrow, this button here, it looks like an up arrow, it's called the caret button above the division symbol, and you can always make an exponent using that button. And so now I'm looking at my window here that the problems give me, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It goes from positive 6 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 6 on the y and the x-axis. So I'm going to go into the window button and set it from negative 6 to positive 6. Leaving the scale at 1, that means there's a check mark at every unit, just like we have on the problem. And so now I'm telling it I want the x-axis to start at negative 6 and go to positive 6, and the same with the y-axis. And so now I'm going to click graph, and now whatever graphs on this picture here is what I'm looking for exactly in the picture for my answer. So I'm looking here and it's a decreasing and it starts running along the x-axis, and so it's not going to be w, but it could be x. Let's look at our other options. But it has the same shape as y and z also. Let's see if we can see where it crosses the y-axis. And so there's a couple of ways that you can do that. And I mean, you could try to count it out on the calculator, and it looks like it's about 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we can have the calculator calculate it for us using this calc feature right here. And so since this calc feature is in blue, I have to use the second button, so second calc. And I wanted to find a value. And so the y-axis is intercepted when x is equal to 0. So I'm going to, here it wants to know what's x, and I'm going to put in 0 and press enter. And it tells me that when x is 0, y is 4. So that's going to be that point right there where the spider is. And so that means I'm looking for an answer here where x is equal, where the y-axis intercept is 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's z. And see, y is 1, 2, and x is 1, 2, 3. So it's not going to be x. My final answer is going to be z, which is choice C. This next question asks you to find the asymptote and the y-intercept of the function below. And so the first step is to go into y equals, clear out what's there in y1, and then just type this new function into y1. So I have 3 caret button x, and then that's the x is the only thing in the exponent, so I'm going to right arrow out, plus 4. Don't forget that step for a right arrow or you're going to get a wrong answer. And so now it looks the same on the screen as it does in the problem. And so I'm going to go ahead and graph it. However, this time I'm going to use Zoom Standard, which is choice 6, so that I get a screen that the axes both start at -10 and go to +10. And there's my graph. So an asymptote is a line that the graph gets closer and closer and closer to, but never intersects. So you can see here that this graph starts to get horizontal, and it's slowly and slowly getting closer to this line, but it's never going to dip below this imaginary line here. And so we need to find out what that imaginary line is. And we also need to find out what the y-intercept is. So the y-intercept is the quicker one on the calculator to calculate, and you're going to use it by going to the calculate feature right here. And so it's going to be second calculate, and you're going to click value, because we know the y-intercept is the y value when x is equal to 0. So I'm going to press 0 and enter, and right away it tells me that my y-intercept is 5, and you can see the little spider blinking on the y-axis at the y-intercept, so that reaffirms that that's the point I'm looking at. So that means my answer has to be C or D. And so here it's telling me the asymptote is equal to y equals 4 or y equals -4. And so when I'm looking, y equals 4 would cut across in the positive, and y equals -4 would cut across in the negative. This line is getting horizontal in the positive, so that probably means my answer is going to be C with the +4. You could double check that is by going into the table feature. So I'm going to press second table, and I'm looking for a y value of 4. And so I'm going to have to scroll in the x column, and I can see the y's are getting smaller and smaller as I go up, and I can see now that it just keeps saying 4. It never goes below 4. So that reaffirms that my y-intercept, or the asymptote, is y equals 4, and so my final answer is C. This next question asks us about a vertical asymptote, so we're going to use the same as the horizontal on the last question, only instead of looking in the y column, we're going to look in the x column, because the numbers are equal to x in the answers. And so your first step is to go into y equals, and you'll clear out anything that is in y1, and type in the new part. And so just a heads up, you cannot use this log button, because this log button is for a base 10. This is a base 3, so you're going to have to go and press the math button, and then you're going to scroll down on that first menu until you see log base parenthesis, and it's choice A. And you can, once the A is highlighted, press enter. And then you just fill it in. So I'm going to fill in a 3 for my base, and I scroll over to the parentheses and fill in x minus 9. And that's it. So now I can just go straight to the table. Just a heads up, you can use second table set to see where your table is going to start in case it starts, really high, so you don't have to do all the scrolling. So I'm going to press 0 there and then go second table. And I see right away that there's an error. And so I'm looking for where the error where it stops saying error, because this means that this is telling me that this is below the asymptote. This is where the graph does not exist. And so I'm going to look at 9, -9, and 3. So if I go down to -9, it's still error before and after. And so then 3, it's still error before and after. But at 9, it says error, but then there's numbers above and below it. So that means that 9 is your asymptote. The graph gets closer and closer to 9, but it never goes below it. So that means x equals 9, choice B, is going to be your final answer. This next question is a little bit differently than all the other questions we've gone over. So you're probably going to want to, pause and rewind and take some notes and slow down a little bit on all the buttons that I'm pressing. But it gives you the answer straight up if you can remember all the steps with the calculator, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so here we have a table, and so and then it takes the table and wants to know which equation best models this data. And so what we're going to do is we are going to go into the list, but you can't just go straight into where it says list. You're going to press stat, and you're going to press edit to edit the list. So enter, and there I'm just going to type in the list. So this table here is horizontal, and I need to type in my list vertical. So I'm going to do X here, the top, as my first list here. And so I press 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter, 5, enter. And then I right arrow over to the second column and type in the second row. And so 197, enter, 260, enter. Make sure it's in the same order. 343, enter, 452, enter, and 597, enter. And I've put this table into the graphing calculator. So to get the equation, I am going to go into stats and over to calculate, and 4 down, or 4 through A more, are going to give you different equations. So linear regression here will give you a linear equation for that data. Quadratic will give you a quadratic equation. Cubic, quartic, and so on. And so looking here, I see that I have an exponential because the x is in the exponent. Same with this one here. I have a linear because the x has an exponent of 1, and I have a quadratic because the x has a quadratic of 2. If you weren't sure on that, then you would just have to start at the beginning and work your way down. Since I have 2 exponentials, I'm going to start with that. So that's choice 0. I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to leave this all the same. So I just press enter until I get down to the end, and calculate is highlighted, and there I press enter. And there it's showing me the form. Okay, so A is the number multiplied by the base with an exponent of x. And so that A number up front is going to be 1.49.3, and 1.32 is going to be the base number. And so I look, and that's choice B. And if I didn't see that right away, that means I'd have to try the linear, and then I have to try the quadratic. But since I have my answer here, that's my final answer. And so number 5 here, it shows is another same type as number 4. So I'm going to go into stat and edit, and I'm going to clear out these lists by highlighting the title of it, pressing clear, and enter. And I'm going to type in my new list. So I'm going to have 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter, 5, enter. Right arrow over to list 2 and type in these new numbers from row 2. And since they're such big numbers, I would pause for a minute and just double check them, which I've already done, so that you can see that they are exactly the same. And so now you're going to go back into stats and go over to calculate. And I look at my answers, and I have an exponential. I have 2 of those, and I have a linear. So I'm going to go ahead and do exponential first. And I press enter. And then once again, you just click enter, enter until you get to calculate, and press enter. And there it's telling you the number out front is 745,000, and the base number is 1.03. And so that directly matches choice A, so that's going to be your final answer. And so this next question is just taking the information in the problem and filling it into the formula. And so here it's telling me that I sub 0 is 1, and that the intensity, which is I, is 528,900,000. And so I'm going to fill that in to the log. So I'm going to press log, and then I'm going to go into math, number, and scroll down to get to the fraction at the very bottom and fill those numbers into the fraction. I use my arrows to do that, and it ends up looking like this. I put an end parenthesis on there, and I press enter, and my answer is 8.7, which is choice A. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new.